Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've come back from seeing The Rider, which is a contemporary western written, directed and produced by Chloe Zhao.
Yes.
Or Zhao Ting. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that brilliantly. Her name in the original Chinese. Oh. She's a Chinese director, writer and so on. And from what I can tell, this is basically a completely independent production. Or fairly independent, that it was only picked up at Sundance, I think.
Yes.
With a cast of non-professional actors.
Yes.
Playing all characters that share their names.
Yes.
For the most, or their first names at least, to make it easier. It's about a young bucking bronco rider, former, who's injured when he's thrown from his horse and it stamps on his head. Basically, He starts off with. He's got a massive wound on the right hand side of his head, just covered up by gauze, and he's kind of picking at it. And he's obviously been he's a little bit slower and a little bit. It's rather like, remember Journeyman, the Paddy Considine film, where it starts off with him being grievously injured as a boxer, and then the film is about his overcoming that injury. There's some similarities to this, I think.
A little bit.
Some.
I wouldn't push it too much.
But that's certainly how it kind of starts. He's got a sister with autism who's about 14, 15 years old. His dad doesn't take very good care of the family, kind of gambles. It's set in South Dakota in the Badlands, so it's kind of very sparse. Not very much grows there.
Is it the Badlands?
Yeah. You can tell.
Is that Monument Valley in the background?
I don't know where Monument Valley is. Isn't that Utah?
I don't know, but it seemed to me that those steps,
the kind of geological formations are kind of not iconic exactly, but
I think they are iconic.
Well, they're iconic if you recognise them, but I just mean the kind of they have a harshness and a kind of
memory being what it is, but it very much reminded me of the landscape of John Ford westerns.
Yeah,
there's always a moment where they go through Monument Canyon. And it's very recognizable, and
Monument Valley's in Arizona.
It's in Arizona, okay.
But it's similar.
It has
kind
a
of territory.
similar kind of
absolutely
thing.
That kind of real sparse deserts with no vegetation, no soil, kind of really harsh kind of erosion.
Lots of grasslands though. So it's not
grass,
deserts.
and they've been able to irrigate and farm, I guess, but still it's kind of sparse, right?
Yeah,
well. I didn't really have a very good time. I don't think it's that good. I think it's a film that flatters people who like to say they like good cinema. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I saw this wonderful film.
I almost agree with you in the sense that it took me a while to get into it.
Yeah.
Right? Because initially all you could see is the faults. I thought, I actually didn't know that the film was being played by non-professional actors. And I just thought, oh my God, why are they being so opaque? And, and of course it turns out they're being opaque because they can't act, But on the other hand, I think that there was something kind of...
There's something very kind of honest and heartfelt.
Yes, and you get a sense of the people through the silences and actually through, things are revealed that are not instantly legible on a face, And actually, you've got to get used to kind of making sense of somebody being recessive and withdrawn and not speaking very much. Yeah, I think the film kind of gives you a little bit of room to do that. I warmed to it, even though initially I was very irritated again, almost by everything. I was very irritated by the characters. Not knowing that the sister was autistic and on the spectrum. I was kind of initially irritated by the representation of that character, right? I thought, does she need to use that voice? So, and actually his best friend, you see the footage, and I thought, my God, initially I thought, how did they get an actor to look like that and then look like that? What makeup must they have used? And of course you realize, well, no, it's a real person, and actually this is what happened to him, and he's now in a home, his throat is disfigured, and all of that is it's his real friend.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I think the film makes excellent use of that. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly noted a focus on kind of physical and mental degeneration amongst people who are really too young to be experiencing that,
Yes.
and it's self-inflicted through the sport. I mean, I'll come out and say I think it's a stupid sport, and there's no need for it. But clearly, it's a kind of way of life.
Yeah.
And that's what the film's talking about. And
But it's a limited way of life. And actually, one of the things where I couldn't buy into the film all the way through is, you know, I hate the film's theme, right? Because, you know, part of the film's theme is, well, you know, you're born to be a cowboy. It's like your calling, and if you can't ride, you can't live. And you think, fuck off. Being a cowboy was a way of making a living in a predetermined time. You know, it's not a spiritual quest. And actually, it's a sign of the impoverishment of a nation, you know, that kind of makes you think that those are your only options, right? And you see that kind of... So, you know, what I love about the film is it brings dignity to each character. Like, yeah. But actually, what I hated about the film is that it takes certain things as a given, you know, like kind of, you know, there are more options for men, really, than those presented. Even, you know, in the place that they live, that's clearly a place that has no options. It reminded me very much of a series of films that I talked about a few years ago, which I called, you know, Mourning for America. So, the film that made Jennifer Lawrence star is one of them.
Lovely Bones, or
no, but something like that.
Winter's Bone.
Winter's Bone, you know, because that's in a rural place, and actually I had scenes that reminded me of it. So, for example, you know, in Winter's Bone, you know, they have to learn how to shoot squirrel to eat.
Yeah.
Here, you see him going into the fields to kill something. I initially thought it was a rabbit, you know.
It looked like a rabbit to me.
Well, I thought it was a rabbit, but then when you see it being chopped up, the ears weren't rabbit ears.
Maybe it's just a shit-eared rabbit.
Yes. Anyway, it had kind of a lot of similarities, right? And so, you know, you have this young man who can no longer be bronco ride, and he kind of accepts that. But then he also learns that he won't be able to even ride. So, you know, he's got no education. So really, the only options that he has is, you know, to work at. They give it a different name, but it's kind of like a Walmart, right? Kind of, you know, that's
Dakota Martin.
Yeah, and all around him you see all the detritus of American culture, right? So you have like these rusty cars in the middle of a field, car
cliches
parts
everywhere.
Well, I
find it very cliched, and also the bit where he's working in the supermarket is something of a staple for me of kind of contemporary westerns, where it's like the contemporary western has something about living in the past about it, like acting like classic western sort of male heroes and whatever, and then you get that contrasted with the kind of harsh strip lighting and order of the supermarket. Like it's an image that you see. I feel like I've seen that before a lot.
Yes.
And it feels like such a cliche to me. Always working in a supermarket. Oh, it's not what he wanted. Oh, it's the you know, what modern America butting up to the nostalgia of.
But I think it's a problem with America, and I think it is a problem with the film. You know, so there's this thing about being a hero, and the obvious thing, you know, if you're a poor person who's in danger of losing their trailer, what the fuck do you care about being a hero? Like, you know, you got bigger problems than whether you fail to be a hero or not to be a hero. You know, it's not a Star Wars film, right? So I didn't buy into that. However, the film has extraordinarily beautiful things. You know, I think all of the moments of training the horse.
Oh yeah.
You know, I think they're fantastic. I mean,
the horse wrangling is spectacular.
It's a thing of beauty to see.
They've managed to get some of the most uncooperative horses in all of cinema, but you can tell the guy knows what he's doing, and they've spent time. Like, I mean, at first when I didn't know he was a non-professional actor, I thought some magic has gone into doing this because you genuinely see a very, very uncooperative, hostile horse being broken. becoming kind of tolerant of having a person on his back, and it's amazing. And it's an extended sequence. There's a YouTube video of someone doing exactly that, which it reminded me of basically. Like, I thought, this is really not a film now. This is just a YouTube video that I've seen.
Well, I mean,
it is amazing.
I come from a family of farmers, so one of my childhood memories is actually kind of seeing my uncles with training the horses, and compared to my uncles, who I always thought were very expert in this guy's an artist, and it's actually beautiful to see.
And it's one of those things about working with animals is, especially doing something as involved as this. If you can't sell that on screen, then you've got nothing.
Yeah.
And of course, and now that I know that the guy actually has this experience and is doing it for real, obviously that explains it. But
yes.
when I didn't know that, I was hugely impressed with how brilliant it was, and it's I suppose it's not that it's less impressive now that I know the guy has that actual experience. It is still very impressive, but I suppose that it's like explaining a magic trick. Like, now that I know this information, it is a little bit less magical.
Other things that bothered me about the film. So to be honest, let's just be clear that unlike you, I did end up liking it very much, and it did move me, and actually it has kind of a Grandma Moses quality about it, right? It's very sparse, kind of, almost like, that picture of the couple with the pitchforks in front of the barn.
American Gothic.
Yeah, it has that aspect to it for me, but it also it has a dignity about the characters and the landscape, and it renders them, I think, there's a stoicism and a sparseness that I find quite beautiful.
I found that hugely cliched as well. I mean, the shots very early on of the kid sitting on the steps on his own in the middle of nowhere, just with a horse maybe, just, God, I've like, every film of this nature has something about isolation and being completely separate from the rest of the world and just being on your own. I thought, God, I've seen this. And so many of these shots are so beautiful, but I challenge you to go into that landscape and not come out with beautiful shots.
No, I agree. Actually, I didn't like the cinematography
easy.
At all.
Yeah.
I mean, all that jumping camera at some point, I thought, why, right? Like, and it kept going in and out of focus, right? But then I imagine that a lot of the film was captured rather than shot, so the going in and out of focus kind of makes sense. There were interesting things for me. So, for example, it's the second film that we've seen recently where young men, like the American Animals is the other one that I'm thinking about, don't have their mind on sex. So here's like this 20-year-old, right, who's trying to think of what to do with his life, and so the choice is he can't do what he always expected to do, what he's good at, and he finds that at the age of 20 already, he's got decreasing options, and he's got this lovely relationship with his sister. He's got kind of a fraught but also kind of loving relationship with the father. We can talk about that because I think we might disagree. But I again find it odd that these young men have no thought of sex or girlfriends or women or men on the horizon.
The difference between the two films I would pick up on is that in American Animals, it's that they have no ambition for anything really. They are bored and kind of dispossessed and all the rest. Whereas in this, his mind is set on getting back to doing what he like. Riding is his passion.
I know,
but so it's not that he has no passion for anything. Like, he does. It's just the sex isn't.
But let me give you a counter example, because for example, you have all the boxing films like John Garfield in Body and Soul, and he's meant to be the same age, right? Like 20 or in his 20s, and he only thinks about boxing. But he's got a girlfriend, and and he wants to get married, and he wants to have a family, and. And it keeps getting delayed because of the narrative, but I find it.
But that is I appreciate that, but that is a notable difference between this and American Animals. I don't think they are that comparable.
I appreciate the difference, but it's just interesting that we've seen two films, one with lots of men in their 20s, and there's not a mention of sex. And I'm not even saying it's a negative thing. In this instance, in the other film, I thought it was a negative thing because, to have all of them completely uninterested in sex just felt untrue.
I disagree with you on that. I think that film was making a point about it. But,
okay, well, we disagree on that. But it's just kind of something interesting and rather remarkable that two films, come out so close to each other with characters, who are basically, for which sex and the sex drive is so down their list of priorities that the film doesn't even mention them.
Yeah, fair enough. I quite like the ending, and I wasn't expecting to. Because as much as I disliked the sort of the idea, the film starts to talk about the idea of destiny and purpose, and a rider rides, and that's his whole thing. And like,
That's so stupid.
God gives us all a purpose, and the horses do this, and the fish do that, and riders ride. And then he gets to the point where the film gives him this choice. So basically, he's been told all throughout, you cannot go back to riding because you're going to kill yourself doing this.
Yes.
You're already having these complex partial seizures that your fist, you can't unclench your fist. It's going to get worse and worse and worse if you keep doing this. But of course he wants to, and so he gets that final scene where he says, "I'm going to return. I'm going to ride again," and the film gives him that absolute binary choice of his dad and his sister are over there supporting him, but reluctantly so, and all the riders are there, his mates, the lads basically, who are like happy to see him back, and I kind of was concerned really that he would ride again, and I thought that if that happened, the film wouldn't be suggesting it was like supportive of that. Like it didn't feel like the film would endorse that. It would know that it was the wrong thing to do, but it would be suggesting that like it is his destiny and that's what he has to do. And I really liked the fact. I really appreciated the fact that he gives it up and goes back to his family. That felt like an appropriate, the right decision, and I liked it.
Yes, the film would have been unbearable and stupid otherwise.
Yeah.
I
felt relieved by it.
Yes. Well, I kind of,
But I suppose I'm not sure that the entire film, despite the fact that it ends that way, I'm not sure that the entire film really embodies that message or is really saying that. Like, somehow it still feels dishonest. I don't know.
No, I don't think it feels...
Dishonest is harsh.
I think it feels uncritical.
Okay.
Rather than dishonest, right? It's so concerned with being respectful of, these people and this way of life that actually it remains uncritical of, what structural absences helps construct this way of thinking, and actually you get a sense that there are real kind of the country hasn't done its duty by its people. They're uneducated, they're hemmed in, they're kind of left without options. There are people who live in a trailer and who are in danger of losing their home, right? And and there's very little way out of there. So so this is the thing that gives people joy and hope, and even that's kind of taken away from them, right? So what remains is family at the end, right?
I didn't like the dedication. I wrote it down because dedication comes up as soon as the film ends. It says, "Dedicated to all the riders who live their lives 8 seconds at a time."
I thought that was stupid as well, and I
didn't like that because I think that is that thing of it is
follow your dream.
The thing follow your dreams. Like again, I hated that as well when the Lane, the kid who's been horribly injured and is now in the assisted living facility, he kind of signs out laboriously to the kids. Follow your dreams. Don't give up on your dreams, he says. Yeah. I'm thinking like, won't someone let him give up on his dreams? Like it's not the right place for him to be.
Get another dream. Find a girlfriend. Anyway, we've got to end here.
Yeah.
So I did like it very much, and I would recommend that people see it. It has incredibly beautiful moments, though I think it's a very flawed film.
I think it's pretty but inconsequential. And if you're the kind of person who wants to show off about the film that you've just seen that no one's ever heard of, then you should definitely see it.
Okay. Goodbye.